Hey, it's Rob. Even our hardcore subscribers sometimes just want the highlights of some of our best shows. But if you ever want the full version, it's right there in the description. Enjoy. His rise to power. But it wasn't until 1975 that Democrats really started rolling out the red carpet for him. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown is concerned about an upcoming mayoral election between Democrat George Moscone and Republican John Barbagelata. The race is tight, so Brown brokers a meeting with Jones to help with the campaign. Moscone ends up winning by 3,000 votes, and many people give Jim Jones the credit because he lent about 1,000 volunteers to the effort. It was also believed that Jones may have bussed people in from outside of California in order to cast ballots, and it was a big thing about election fraud. And there was supposedly a big investigation into election fraud, but even the investigation was suspect because the DA whose job it was to investigate the election fraud also worked for Jim Jones. Moscone rewards Jim Jones by appointing him as chairman of the Housing Commission Authority for San Francisco. Pause for a second. When you think of America's most famous criminals, the John Gacy's, the Jeffrey Dahmers, the Charles Mansons of the world, how much worse would it have been had they been put in a position of actual power? That's what George Moscone did when he effectively made Jim Jones the largest landlord in the city of San Francisco, in charge of 3,500 public housing units. Thanks to the Democrat Party, Jim Jones is now officially on the map. They knew as far back as 1972 that he was beating church members. They knew as far back as 1972 that he was stockpiling weapons. They knew about the fake faith healings. They knew about the underage marriages. They knew about the financial exploitation of his congregation and the leftist fundamentalism, and they ignored all of that because they wanted the power, and they were socialists too. Long before the poor people drank the Kool-Aid, the rich and powerful did. Like that time Jane Fonda wrote a letter to the People's Temple saying, and I quote, "I also recommit myself to your congregation as an active full participant, not only for myself, but because I want my 2 children to have the experience." Over the next few years, Fonda would come to Jones's defense on many occasions to vouch for his high moral standards and character. Then there's that time Pastor Cecil Williams awarded Jim Jones the Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award. The time the Los Angeles paper named Jim Jones Man of the Year. And that time Religion and American Life magazine named Jones among the 100 most important clergymen. This is 1977. But Jones had already leased 3,000 acres of land from the Guyanese government back in 1973. At a time when thousands upon thousands of people were fleeing the communist government under Forbes Burnham, Jones was planning to move his entire congregation to Guyana to build a socialist heaven on earth called Jonestown.